454-7006. It's also posted on our radio show page. Now we'd like to welcome our wonderful guest, Bishop James Long. Welcome, Bishop, and how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for inviting us. I do appreciate it.
We appreciate having you here, too. As we said privately before the show started, that there seems to be an amazing amount of evidence about almost everything paranormal out there, and a great deal of the negative experiences that people have, or perhaps paranormal groups have lately, especially with all these shows on the TV. People think they can pick up after watching the show, get a kid, and go out and do something. And then when they encounter something, whatever it is that's really negative, they either can't help the people, they don't understand it, and they can't tell the difference between if it's a mean human spirit or a diabolical infestation or whatever the case may be. It's really, I would say, in my opinion, as a researcher and teacher, it's really a subject that's not breached often enough, and it's really misunderstood. So I wanted to start off by asking you, the Bible mentions angels and the devil, and the Quran also mentions angels and the jinn, with a slight difference about the jinn. But I was wondering if you could just explain a little about what a demon is and why they hate humans so much.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of debate from theologians as far as the origins of demons. And, some people would say they are spirits of deceased evil people. And that's actually a view of Philo, Josephus, and some early Christian writers. Even ancient Greeks argue that as well. Really, that's proved false by Scripture, because in Luke 16, verse 23, talks about what happens to the evil people who choose to reject God's grace and do evil. So that's really, honestly, the very essences of a human being and an angel are two different things. So therefore, I don't believe that spirits of deceased evil people were completely two different essences. Some say it's the spirits of pre-Adam race, based on the gap theory between Genesis 1 verse 1 and Genesis 1 verse 3, about the recreation, the original creation of humanity, and fell and established spirits and demons. But again, there's nothing biblically at all to warrant that. To warrant that explanation. Other people say it's the offspring of angels and women, talking about incubus. And again, really, people, that really is unfortunate that people are trying to say that, because they don't quite understand what an incubus and succubus are and what they actually do. And so therefore, the thought that the offspring of human beings and demonic entities just... it's based on the sons of God in Genesis 6, verse 2, where, angels, basically, it was believed to have relations with daughters of men, and they produced an offspring.
Right, I remember reading that, but what are the differences between the incubus and the succubus? I wasn't sure about that.
Well, a demonic entity on the incubus level will attack women on a sexual nature, and a succubus attacks men on a sexual nature. But with offspring of angels and women, or demonic entities and women, they'll say it's Nephilim. It's because they say Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. You see, they were demons. So people will try to say that Nephilims were actually these offsprings, and quite honestly, that's not true. At all. And as a matter of fact, there's no indication at all that Nephilims were demons at all. And if you look at the actual translation, the proper translation of Scripture, they were probably seen as heroes or fierce warriors. So the translation is incorrect. What I believe, and makes more sense theologically, is they were fallen, unconfined angels who have rejected God's grace, who refuse to acknowledge that humankind is created in the image of God. And so that is what I think theologically is more sound than all of them.
That's very interesting, and I don't mean to get off the track, but since she brought that up, there's a whole cacophony, so to speak, of dark entities which may seem to act different, or people think that it could be an incubus, succubus, a shallow person or something else. In the Muhammad belief, they say that the jinn were made from smokeless fire, and they created and they ruled the earth, and then God created humankind, and God said, I made some superior beings, you should bow to them. And they didn't want to, so now they're against us, but they believe that there's good and bad jinn, and the Jewish people believe in the D book, which is similar in nature to that. So it was really quite confusing, but just sticking, not going too far off the track, just coming back to what you're trained for and you've experienced and know. As I said earlier, there seems to be a whole plethora of different types of spirits. That some people say that's a shallow person, that's a nasty human being, incubus, succubus, or something else, demonic or whatever. So can you classify them in a category, or are there subcategories? Like, is there, like, in the demonic, for example, like generals and lieutenants and other types of beings that fall under that class? Could you kind of clear that up with us?
Yeah, when you're talking, first of all, when you're talking about jinn, it is believed, obviously, with the Muslim faith that they do exist, and they are created by Allah to, of course, do good and do evil. And so, therefore, jinns, there are many Muslims who believe that not all jinns are evil. And so, however, when we're talking about demonic entities, fallen angels who have rejected God's grace, we're talking about entities who wish harm to the very people that God created. We're created in the image of God. And I think that people have got to understand that we are created in His image. And so therefore, I think because we are created in His image, you have angels who have refused to acknowledge that and refused to follow the fact that they're here to serve us, to assist us. Now, when you're talking about classification of demons, there are several classifications of demons. Until, there's the first hierarchy. Well, actually, Mike used to, it was his first hierarchy, and then, of course, the second hierarchy and third hierarchy. Barrett's classification of demons by actual, like, for example, Beelzebub, idolaters. There's other demonic entities that coincide with certain things, like witches and warlocks and vile revengers. However, I do not believe that witches are evil. I just people who participate in that type of way of life, I just don't go to the extreme. There's also a classification by month, classification by office. So it's very, very detailed. When you start talking about demonic entities, and depending on which classification there's quite a few. There's a lot of theologians out there who try to classify them to try to understand their ultimate essence. But no matter what you see, and those classifications are good. It explains or at least it tries to explain the demonic entity's goal, or what they try to strive on, what they manipulate, whether it be lust, whether it be alcohol abuse, or whatever it might be. But the fact is in the end, if you forget all the classifications, if you forget all the first hierarchy, second hierarchy, third hierarchy, if you forget everything, the ultimate goal for a demonic entity is to hurt God.
That I agree with.
And the way, of course, they hurt God is to hurt the very ones that God loves most, which is us.
Which is
so
us.
Therefore, if they hurt us, they directly hurt God.
That's it right there. That's it. That makes total sense. Now, I'll be kind of jumping around. I tried to have this to go in a specific order, but as I told you earlier, it could go anywhere.
Sure.
Led by spirit.
One of the most common misunderstood things by the general public would be possession. First of all, I don't think that they perhaps know that possession, true full possession is rare, even though it can occur, but it's rare, but that they don't realize that there are. Well, let me ask you this. Is it true that there are about 3 stages the devil takes that could lead up to possession, like temptation, oppression, and obsession, and there's different degrees of it, and what is the result?
Well, yeah, we are talking about I've simplified it to the point where a lot of people can understand it. And it just makes a lot of sense when you, at least for me, when I compartmentalize the stages of what I have seen. And the stages that I have clearly have seen are infestation, and then leading to oppression, and that leads to possession. Now, under the stage of oppression, that is a very detailed stage. It's not just a simple where it begins to interact and attack the person. It's far more detailed and more in depth than what people think. Now, I don't go into great knowledge on each one, no matter if I do conferences or if I do radio, and here's why. There are far too many people within the paranormal community who now have read books or who have heard whether it be a speak or whatever it might be, and then they go out and they say that they're exorcists. That really is becoming a major, major problem. So there are some things that really should not be discussed, and so I think for a very basic outline: infestation, oppression, possession. And but I will tell you that when you're talking about oppression, it's a very, very in-depth and quite dangerous stage.
I totally believe that. And I was on a show one particular time, actually a couple, but this person stated that, oh yeah, I get rid of demons and this and that, but she couldn't give any background to prove that she was properly trained. And during the show, she tells me that, oh yes, I usually do the show from here, but I have to go over here to do the show because why? And this is before the show starts, because the demons that are in my home are bothering me.
Wow.
And so I'm doing it from a different area, and then all the power went dead, and I finally got recontacted back, and she said this never happened before. And then we went on with the show, but there was lots of static interruptions, and when you listen to the show later, you can hear, with headphones on, growling and nasty words and stuff. And this is not the first show that's happened to me on, and I'm just saying that, as we discussed earlier, whenever the rare times that I've tried to do something with a show or somebody's told me about they're doing research or going to teach or whatever about it, they seem to get messed with these outside influences.
Well, I think what you have, to be honest with you, and I've been doing this for a very, very long time, and I think what you have and what I have seen is I have seen an epidemic within the paranormal community, and I serve the paranormal community, but I have seen an epidemic where there are far too many people who are playing demonologists and exorcists and who have absolutely no training whatsoever, no business, and performing these rituals. None at all. And yet they're doing it. Here's what bothers me about this. Number one, there are people who are performing the solemn rite of exorcism, and they're not ordained. They're not a Catholic priest. Now, they're not trained. Now, some people say, "Well, Bishop Long, that's not fair. You're not being inclusive." Listen, the solemn rite of exorcism is not. I didn't write the prayer, so this is not something that I wrote. And people have got to understand when you're talking about. First of all, when you're talking about the solemn rite, and that is a ritual that is performed on someone who is possessed, validly possessed, the very first mentioning of the solemn rite was actually written by Pope Cornelius in 253. Now, and this is a very ancient rite, and even the medieval rites of exorcism included renunciation of the devil in 1614. It's such an ancient ritual, and the rubrics, the rules of the rite, and not rules that I wrote, but rules of the rite state that if you are not a Catholic priest, validly ordained and trained, you have no business even reading this ritual.
And
wow.
It says.
And additionally, in 1614, didn't they state that under the authority of the bishop, permission must be gained, otherwise you cannot do it?
Actually, the first form rite of exorcism was written in 1614. So this is yes. So you're talking about, and you have to have the bishops or your ordinaries, what they call the ordinaries' permission. And see, the thing is what's happening is you have a lot of people who are taking a very ancient ritual, and they're trying to secularize this. They're trying to say, well, I can find it on the internet, so if I can find it on the internet, then I'm allowed to do it. Well, no, because you have to read the rubrics first. The rules of the ritual that I didn't write clearly state that if you're not a Catholic priest, you have no business reading this ritual, none. Now, that would be like me performing a shamanic ritual. I'm not a shaman. Therefore, I have no business picking up a shamanic ritual. But yet we're seeing so many people who claim, well, I'm Christian, therefore because I'm Christian, I'm also allowed to do and recite this prayer on someone who may be possessed. And that's just not so.
That's true. People just, there's a preponderance of information and books on magic and copies of this Bible, that Bible, and Ouija boards and all kinds of things you can buy from Amazon, for example, that people are getting and going out and using them, and that's very dangerous. And what really, some people made an uproar a few years ago when Hasbro released a pink Ouija board for kids, and that's very dangerous.
Yeah, there's a pink Ouija board for kids, and I've seen a blue Ouija board for boys. I've seen several things that are that clearly are trying to reduce it. And of course, I understand that the makers of the Ouija boards, believe it's just a toy. Well, but the intent of that toy is where the problem lies.
That's
true. That's true. I agree with that. And then, but like you said, it's just like you said that even on the internet, just even reading that would you have to be ordained to even if they publish it on the internet.
I'm sorry, what was that? You have to be what now?
Do you have to be an ordained bishop or get the permission from the bishop, and even if they post it on the internet, the rights to read it?
Unfortunately, the right is published on the internet.
Wow.
And so it's easily accessible, and that's unfortunate. So now there are, and because it is written there, and that's why there are so many people. I got a call the other day from a family who's absolutely terrified. Someone went in, claimed to be a demonologist, and they're performing the minor rite of exorcism. Now, again, we people don't quite understand. A demonologist is not the same thing as an exorcist. A demonologist has no business performing the minor rite or solemn rite of exorcism because they're not ordained. So they have no business. And so what's happening is the demonologists, people who claim to be demonologists, are going a step past what they should do. And here's what I always tell people. Demonology or demonologists and exorcists have nothing to do with the paranormal. It's theological. It's not paranormal. And what's happening is people who are within the paranormal community, who are secular, who are not ordained, are taking a theological term and trying to secularize this, like doctor, teacher, lawyer. And that's the line is crossed. And so it's quite dangerous, and I see it. We get it all the time at the Paranormal Clergy. All the time. You would not believe how many cases we get on a daily basis from people who went in, claimed to be a demonologist, performed rituals, all hell broke loose, and now they're calling us to help.
Yes, that's a terrible thing. Under theology, the preternatural has to do with that particular area that you are trained under and others shouldn't mess with, because it took hundreds of years for the Catholic Church to understand it through experience and theology and many things. Is there any particular advice you'd have to anybody that thinks that they can learn something that's not trained like you are? For example, how can we tell people don't mess with this? What type of advice do you have, if any?
Here's what I find absolutely fascinating, and that's a great question. People ask me this question all the time, and this is what I always tell them. I say, are you afraid of great white sharks?
I am.
I am.
So here's my advice: don't jump in the ocean with them.
Good advice.
What's fascinating to me is that there are so many paranormal investigators crossing that line because they just want to see. They just want to get that evidence. Well, when you get that evidence, what are you going to do next when that entity then comes to your home and provokes you?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that is the thing that just gets me to no end. I've seen so many shows and so many people, and at the end, and I'm sure it's a long process when these people go in to investigate just to see. But even as we see, at the end they're just saying, oh, okay, this is what you have, and if you have anything else, just call us, without actually helping the family, number one. And they're just going in to stir up dirt. That just drives me bananas.
Here's what's absolutely fascinating. What I find fascinating is that people who go into places that have alleged demonic activity. There's two things I find really just amusing. Not amusing, but just like sometimes you have to shake your head. But one is they go in and they provoke and they demand the demonic entity show itself, and they're puffing their chest out and beating their chest and like they're King Kong and saying, I dare you to do something. I dare. A demonic entity is looking at those people, and the demonic entity is saying, I will show myself to you. When you're sick, when you're ill, when your wife or husband loses you, or they leave you, or when you lose a job, or when you're depressed, or when you're anxious, or when you're so down and out that you hit rock bottom, that's what I'm going to show you. This is who I am.
And
wow.
There's no time limit. They got forever. They can bide their time and hit you right where it counts, when it counts. And they're intelligent beings, not to be messed with. And I'm
Absolutely.
told that priests, when they're doing an exorcism, they're not to engage the entity either. They're just to continue with the prayers. So, that makes a lot of sense.
Priests, exorcists who perform this ritual are always, for the rest of their lives, they will always be under the stage of oppression for the rest of their lives. Because once you get into this ministry and you come across a true demonic case, then it is now aware of you, and you are now aware that you can never close that door. Once you cross that line, then it'll never stop.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So you made some good points here, which brings to two questions. One is that on your website you help people and you have lists for people to look at, to think about if they have problems with a person or their property. So, I just want to remind the listeners that, if there's something wrong in your home, just don't go running to his website. Look at some facts, questions, and answers first, because I'm saying probably, 99 out of 100 cases are not demonic, and at a great part, maybe 10% could be a haunting, and maybe that rare 1% could be either a demonic infestation or a possession or something of that nature, because they're truly, those types of happenings are rare. And you can tell me by how many, which you mentioned earlier, actual exorcisms you've done, shows you of the thousands of people who contact you how truly rare it really is. So for people to check it out before they contact you.
Well, absolutely. I've been doing this for roughly publicly about 13 years now. And we get emails every single day from a Facebook, because I have several Facebook accounts for the church and for the paranormal clergy, and the emails and my personal email, that's gotten out. But anyway, we get so many emails from people. And I got to tell you, the amount of emails that we get, it's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming. I have 2 administrators for the paranormal clergy. That's how much help is needed, because there's so much. And Kat Lang and Rich Valdez, who do an absolute beautiful job as administrators for the paranormal clergy. They have a long time experience within the paranormal. So they're administrators, and they sift through all the emails. And if the emails, they do their investigation preliminaries, and if the case warrants the paranormal clergy affiliate's attention, then they will post that case in our private group. And then our team goes out and starts investigating. But I performed 26 exorcisms on people who were validly possessed. Now, we're not talking about people who are screaming and carrying on and acting like a fish out of water. We're talking about really true, valid possession. And so I always tell people, when someone claims that they are possessed, or if they have a demonic infestation in their home, there's one of four things going on. The person claiming to be possessed or have a demonic in their home, they're lying so they can get attention, or they truly believe that they're possessed or have a demonic entity in their home, but the paranormal activity can be explained. Or the person has a mental illness. And finally, the last possible option is a person is telling you the truth. Now, I always warn paranormal investigators, you need to pay very close attention to number 3 and number 4. The person has a mental illness, or they're telling you the truth. Because if you walk into a home where someone is telling you the truth, then you better darn well be ready to take care of whatever's in there. And number 3, the third option, if they are mentally ill, that is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. I used to be a case manager at a homeless shelter, and I had a lot of clients who had schizophrenia, who had dissociative personality disorder. And I tell you, a friend of mine had a case one time. She's not a part of the paranormal clergy, but she had a case, and she walked into a woman's home, and she saw all these little holes in the woman's kitchen, all these little puncture holes, and there was hundreds of them. And then she asked the client, she said, "Why are all these holes in your walls?" And the lady then pulled out a broom, and she had cut the end of her broom off, and she had actually duct taped a huge, gigantic butcher knife at the end of it. And she said, every time I see that demon, I stab it.
Wow.
Yep.
Extreme. Wow. So, like the case of The Exorcist in around 1973 or so, where it's not really a female, they made the movie, and it was a male and books written on it with Father Bolden and Halloran
sure.
and other crew. They said that they wanted to send them to a medical doctor, send them to a psychiatrist to rule out certain things, and they stated that perhaps if a person could speak an unknown language or know things that are not possible, or other signs, levitation perhaps, which is rare, or other different things. Are there different signs that an exorcist would look for once they decide that perhaps this person may or may not be possessed?
Yeah, and when you're talking about the several of the signs, certainly when you walk into a place where someone is validly possessed, there is a presence, no question. No, there's no guessing. You don't have to guess if a demonic entity is actually present. You absolutely know. There is no question about it. The overwhelming feeling of oppression is quite heavy. And then you have other stages, which I will not describe those stages of an exorcism. But I will tell you this: there are absolutely signs to know if someone is dealing with a mental illness versus if someone is truly possessed. I mean, a person who is mentally ill will not have knowledge of future events or hidden things. So an exorcist will do things privately that no one else will know. The exorcist is beginning to provoke. Not provoking by, come on, demon, show yourself, I dare you, but provocation through prayer. And quite often, the demonic entity will begin to mimic or make fun of or become very aggressive when no one else knows what the exorcist is doing, but the demonic entity will know. The possessed will have superhuman strength. They will absolutely speak in unknown or strange languages. For example, if I begin to speak the Our Father in Aramaic, and I begin to speak it, it will actually speak the Our Father backwards in Aramaic. So I don't know how to speak the Our Father backwards in Aramaic. I wouldn't even know where to begin to do that. But it will.
That's amazing. And people that are purportedly possessed, have mental problems, may go around saying that they are, when in fact the actual possessed person may not be sure what's going on because the demonic entities do not want to be discovered, so they try to, keep it hidden as much as possible until if there's an actual, exorcism going on when they can't help but be discovered. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, and when we're talking about the stages of an exorcism, that's the stages that I won't go into, because as an exorcist we'll know which stage that they are actually in during an exorcism. And so there are several stages in which an exorcist will continue the ritual, and depending on the activity of the demonic entity and, of course, the possession of the body, that is when an exorcist will know, okay, we have to continue this route, we have to continue this route. But again, I don't make those known, obviously, because, as I stated earlier, unfortunately, there's a lot of people imitating that they shouldn't. But there's one thing that they would certainly, a possessed person I have seen is smells. The smell of usually rotten flesh. I used to be a chaplain for a police department here locally, and when someone passes away, they've been passed for a long time. When you walk into the room, there is that smell that you can never forget. As a matter of fact, there is chemicals that you put under your nose because the smell is so horrible. But it's very, very similar to that smell. Very, very similar. There's always a reaction to holy relics or sacred items. And that's why I tell people, stop throwing holy water around like it's tap water. People are doing that far too often, and that holy water is considered a sacramental. What's happening is people are just throwing holy water around like it's nothing. Well, if you come into a situation where you have a true demonic infestation, a demonic is present, and you're throwing holy water around, well, what do you think is going to happen when that holy water, which is a blessed object, comes in contact with a cursed object? You're going to have a clash.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes. What are you going to do then? So I just tell people, be careful about that.
Yes, and I'm glad that you're not. I mean, it's always been a dark area, which I can't blame. The Catholic Church wanting to keep it secret, and I'm glad that you're not, revealing certain things. Perhaps it's just better that way, because people shouldn't be doing what they shouldn't be doing and then getting themselves in trouble and then coming to see you. It's just, some things just need to be kept quiet and left to those people who are trained to do it properly.
Yeah, and people sometimes get upset about that, but it's kind of like people got to understand there's training that goes behind these things. And I've done conferences before, and let me tell you, I've had some very interesting experience in being serving in the paranormal field. I've had my slides, my presentation actually stolen, and someone went around and were using my exact slides in my presentation and telling people that they are a demonologist and that they are studying to be an exorcist.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling, so I'm always careful about what I say and how much information that I divulge because of that type of activity. It's amazing. Yeah, I could tell you stories that would absolutely stun you with my experience in the field.
I totally believe you. And I don't know if there's young people listening or not, so I know you or I are not going to go into anything that's really deep that might frighten people. But and I know you never do it because you and I both have prophet ethics, and this could be really scary if you get too deep into it. And some things, of course, you can't really talk about, and I understand that and respect that. Now, before I go into some more interesting things, I just want to ask you one more thing. There is somebody that I know that tried to help somebody else who contacted me and a wife and somebody else through a certain website, and they basically said, yes, I played with the Ouija board at night by myself up in my room. Then this entity comes and says that, oh, I'm your spirit guide, you should smoke marijuana for your health and this and that, and basically tricked him into inviting him in. Once that happened, this guy has, you know, had things happen to him that nobody would like to happen when they're in bed, including being roughed up, slapped around, and scratched, and all these different things. I told, you know, that's what made me want to get websites like yours to help people. I couldn't help him, and at that time I refused, but said I'd try to find help, and so did the wife. But the other person that I know, who's a great friend of ours, had told us that this person was coming over because this person was staying with us for a while, and I have a special room out in the back, and said, I'm going to help him. I said, oh, no, you shouldn't help that person. And she said, well, I've gotten rid of spirits before and this and that. And I told her this is different. She said, let me give it a try. And I said, well, take your cell phone with you just in case something happens. And I'm not really sure, you know. But anyway, a few minutes into it, I went out there. This guy was like nobody had ever seen before. He stood up. He was angry. He wanted to be helped now. He turned all red. His face kind of distorted a little bit, like I thought I needed my glasses on because it looked like it was changing to a little bit different face. His eyes, and I'm telling you, the first time I've ever seen it scared the heck out of me, but, you know, I stopped it in time. His eyes turned solid black, and I told this other person to stop this now and let's get him out of here, and we did. Now, she moved to, I don't want to say her name, but to another continent, and sometime after that, she was out horseback riding with friends, and she was thrown off her horse. Horse got spooked or something and hit her head on a rock, almost died, was put in a induced coma, and eventually took time to recover. Do you think that could be a repercussion for her trying to help that person?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what happens, here's what people have got to understand something. A lot of people, especially who are not properly trained, what they will do is they will say, now I'm a Christian, and therefore because I'm a Christian, I can go out and cast out demons. And yet they forget about what Christ did to the apostles before he told them to go cast out demons, and that was breathing the Holy Spirit upon them, ordination. And then he said, go cast out demons. What's happening is a lot of people who are not properly trained at all, who have no business performing this, they say, well, because I'm a Christian, I have a right to go out and cast out demons. What they're doing is there's a big difference between a deliverance and an exorcism. They are not the same thing, and I wish people would stop comparing the two, because they're not. It's apples and oranges. And what's happening is the people who are claiming to be, you know, trained and exorcists, and like this person you're talking about, there's a person now going all over the internet claiming to be an exorcist and claiming to be ordained with this church and that church, which I later found out was a blatant lie. And then says that, you know, that this person is a high-ranking Wiccan priest, and then claims to be an exorcist as well. It's just utter nonsense. And you play with fire, you're going to get burned.
I believe it. And I believe this person I was talking about didn't claim that. You know, I mean, others probably do, but she was just innocently, perhaps misunderstood the nature of the situation of the person she was helping with, and, you know, from her heart thought she could help but didn't. So that's another purpose of the show, so people, if they feel something's bad, they should not handle it, but refer them to somebody professional.
I have a response from the person that it happened to. They said that they didn't know that they were wondering whether or not it was a demon, because they just thought it was a angry spirit, and that they've had success before just with talking to someone and, you know, finding out what's going on with the person and helping maybe to get you know, to help them with the situation. But the person never claimed to be, you know, like you said, David, an exorcist or a demonologist or anything like that. But she really, this person really believes in, you know, like helping people find peace and tranquility, kitty cats and rainbows and stuff like that. And she's very angel-based. So that's why, you know, when you're called to, you know, talk to people about angels, when you're called to talk to people about, the positive things in life. It was just that she was called to do that. So she was not sure. That's why I'm glad that we're having the show so we could know the difference,
Well,
but she was not sure if it was a demon or she just thought it was just an angry spirit.
There's an old thing that I was taught when I was in the seminary. And the old thing is brilliant, and there was an old monk who taught us this, and he says, you never act with a doubtful conscience because you may allow an evil to occur. And what that means is if you go into a situation where you don't know if you're dealing with a malevolent human spirit versus a demonic entity, and you walk in and you're not trained to take care of a demonic issue, then you've walked in with a doubtful conscience. And therefore you can allow an evil to occur, which is a person can go under the stage of possession. So that was a brilliant way that he explained it to us, is never act with a doubtful conscience. You may allow an evil to occur. What happens is there's a lot of paranormal investigators or a lot of people who I have great friends who are psychics and who really want to help out or believe in angelology, just want to help out somebody. They have huge hearts, huge, gigantic hearts, and they want to help. And they feel like they're called to help, but you've got to know the limit. You've got to. I may be called to be a pilot, but who's going to get in a plane with me if I'm in the cockpit of a 747 and I've never been trained?
True.
No one's. So just because someone is called to do something, they've got to know their limits. I may be called to be a pilot, but if I'm not trained to fly that plane, I'll never get in the cockpit of a 747 ever. And so people got to understand that even though these people with huge hearts, that's wonderful, and that's absolutely terrific. But when you're dealing with possession, or when you're dealing with the possibility of possession, tread very lightly.
That makes a great deal of sense. And I believe there's not enough, let's just say psychics, for example, that teach people how to use their gifts. As we said before, they teach you all angels, kitty cats, rainbows, spirit guide, this, not go out and do your stuff. They fail to warn them about protocols and procedures and protection against the dark and not to mess with it and to refer them to somebody else or whatever. So that thing needs to be changed. But now that we've said that, could I ask you something, if you're allowed to talk about something that we've all seen on TV? Could we ask you a little bit about, Bobby McKay's on Ghost Adventures?
Bobby McKay's, yeah.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that, whatever you choose to tell us?
Whatever you would like for me to talk about, I can talk about anything you like.
I have a quick question, guys, before we start on that. I'm still in communique with the person that had the incident, and they would like to know from both of you, if possible, would that entity still be attached to them? And because they still feel that things don't seem to make sense, that they have like anger that's out of character and stuff like that.
Yeah, when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with oppression. And keep in mind, malevolent human spirits can attach as well. So it's not always demonic. So malevolent human spirits can certainly attach to a person who's wanting to help, who has a big heart and who wants to go out and try to assist. But the problem is once you do that, you're putting yourself at great risk, and not only yourself, but those people whom you live with, or in your own home. And so what happens is attachments are very, very, they occur quite easily, especially in malevolent human spirit cases, where it'll attach to you, and then you go into the stage of oppression, where you clearly know that we're talking about not demonic, but let's say malevolent human spirit, where it actually interacts with, as many people say, your energy, or basically very short-tempered, incredibly short-tempered, almost isolating yourself from all your family members and friends, to a point where you want nothing to do with anybody, and even thoughts, horrible thoughts that are coming into your head that you know are not your thoughts. And really the one way to, and that's when you're talking about deliverance. See, under those stage, then you're talking about a deliverance can be done. In other words, and that can be done by laity, which is praying over the person for the deliverance of any form of attachment. But now that's not possession. That's different than a possession. And the person can actually take a stand and And a way to defeat any type of attachment, or especially if they're very short-tempered or having ill thoughts, is immediately when they're having those ill thoughts that they normally never would. Someone told me that they love their animals, that their animals are their children, but after a case, they actually had thoughts of picking up their animal and throwing them against the wall. And I told them, I said, well, of course, that's a very serious issue. And they've never been violent all their life. Never once. And I told them the way to recover for that is to immediately realize these are not your thoughts, to take a stand and reject them.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that.
That makes excellent sense. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
We have about 9 minutes left. I'm kind of torn between asking you about Bobby McKay's or some interesting case, with only the details that you wish to disclose, of course, about that either fascinated or shocked you or you want to
I can do both very quickly. I can do both and make you happy. How's that?
Okay, that's great.
I will say this. Bobby Mackey's guys on Bobby Mackey's several episodes with the Ghost of Interest game, guys, and they're great guys. They're very, very fantastic guys. And I will tell you this, Zach had been going through pure hell, absolute pure hell in his home. And I talked to Zach. I asked him to go public with some things that are occurring in his home, and he did, to let people know that there are consequences for his actions. Now, I have been working with Zach, and so far he seems to be doing much, much better. I will tell you that everything that they found at Bobby Mackey's was 100% legitimate. I no question. I would never listen. I'm not paid by Ghost Adventures, so I don't get paid for this ministry. So it's 100% free. So there's no real benefit for me to lie at all, zero, because there's no financial benefit. There's nothing, and so I will only tell the truth, and I will tell you that 100%, without question, without doubt, I can verify, I can vouch for the activity that we captured at Bobby Mackey's. There were things that they did not put in there because it was so sensitive material that was discovered through EVP work and disembodied voice that it was too personal to the guys. That's all I'll say about that. It became a very personal attack, and even to the point where Zach went down. And so I will absolutely vouch, because I even have my personal EVPs, and the EVPs were very, very aggressive, incredibly aggressive. And a quick story about this. Actually, after we did the minor rite of exorcism on the Bobby Mackey's, a group called us 2 weeks later and was very angry with me because no activity was occurring there. Because they went to do an investigation,
Wow.
And they got angry, and they started posting all over the internet how they are so upset. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's like you're complaining that a great white shark didn't bite you. Amazing. And I will tell you a case that will always be with me for the rest of my life. She was a 68-year-old woman. She was like her grandmother. She was the most wonderful human being in the world. I loved her so much. But she was going through absolute pure hell. This was an incubus case, and when I got involved with her, kind of both orifices, I would say, in her private regions were ripped apart. They were literally ripped. And so she was in the hospital under doctor's care, and she was admitted. And because this thing was constantly attacking her on a sexual nature. We actually have a video of her sleeping on the bed, and the bed sheets rise, and they come down, and they rise real high, and they come back down, and she begins to scream because it's attacking her sexually. It would attack her so violently that she crashed her car. She could not drive anymore. She said I completely stopped driving. It would literally pinch her very violently in her private regions. And so we worked with her and worked with her, and finally, about a year, she was free from all this activity, but she passed away. But she lived a year without being attacked, and it was a very violent, vicious attack.
That is really the worst of the worst. That's amazing. This is real. It's been documented not just in recent time, but for centuries, and by very credible people. And some people that play around with it in the wrong way. Isn't it true that depending on how deep the entity might be in a possessed person, to the point of maybe fully possessed or for a long time, which I know is rare. Is it true that some people just, can't be exorcised, it's too late, or could they die from it? Could you just touch on that a little bit?
The possibility of a person expiring in full possession is absolutely very high, because the demonic entity will not allow substance of life to enter the body, which is food and water. And so often the person who is in full possession never gets relief from the possessed state, and therefore they die primarily from dehydration, malnutrition. And so that's different than transient possession, where the demonic entity enters and leaves the body at will. And so that's completely different. But yes, the possibility of a person expiring is very high. That's why you have to have a medically trained personnel there during an exorcism, and you have to have, of course, a psychological evaluation performed prior to even thinking about performing an exorcism.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I just want to remind everybody out there that's listening to Bishop James Long tonight that this gentleman here, this is his calling, and he spends a lot of extra time helping many, many people, whether through actual help or advice or whatever. This gentleman is not a member of the traditional Roman Catholic Church where he's provided for with everything. This gentleman is a member of the old Catholic Church, and he has to pay for everything himself. So he is actually going out of his way to help others, and he's not even getting paid for being on the show tonight. I just had to say that because, I wish there was more people around like you.
I really appreciate that very much. I do, and I just keep doing what I do, and I'm very passionate about this. And I will tell you this quickly: I have a lot of education behind me, and I'll tell you, I spend about 60 hours a week on this every week. And if I did not know for a fact possession occurred, I'd be doing something else with my time. But it's a passion, it's a calling, and the only thing that I can do is answer the call and keep serving. And that's what I'm here for.
Well, thank you very much, Bishop. I appreciate that. Now we're getting short on time, so now it's my time to ask you not only to say whatever you feel you wanted to say that you didn't have the opportunity to previously on the show, and is there any events or any announcements you'd like to make as well?
I am going to be doing an actual class on demonology. It's a very, very in-depth 2-hour class on possession and demonology, and that's actually on my Facebook page. I'll be posting it up, and that's on facebook.com/paranormal clergy. And so that's going to be probably one of the most in-depth classes that I've done in a very long time.
Great.
That's good. At least you're giving somebody an education, and I know they'll be trained properly.
Absolutely. And go to Mid-South. Go to Mid-South Conference in Louisville, Kentucky. Keith Age. I'll be there chatting for folks and actually offering Mass on Sunday as well. So don't forget that, folks.
That's good. Now, at Mid-South, what kind of events could people expect to participate in once they attend that?
Well, there's all kinds of speakers. There's vendors. It's August 2nd to the 4th. It's in Louisville, Kentucky. They go to LouisvilleGHS.com. LouisvilleGHS.com. They can find all kinds of information there. I mean, it's tons of information. A lot of fun. It's in Louisville, and I'll be giving a speech there, too.
Thank you, Bishop. God bless you, and thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. It's been one of the most amazing shows that we've ever done, and we have hopes perhaps in the future that we might have you back if you had the time or would be willing to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, everybody, there you have it. There's our show tonight. We don't often put out this type of information, but we think it's critical that everybody realizes that there are some areas that we don't understand that maybe we should not be messing with, and go get advice from somebody else that's experienced in it. Anyway, thank you for listening to Beyond the Gate Radio tonight. We thank you all for listening, tuning in. I'm your host, David Baker. I'm saying good night, and for my co-host, Sherelle Baker.
Good night, and don't forget the kitty cats and rainbows on our next show.
That's right. Bye now. seem to act different, or people think that it could be an incubus, succubus, a shadow person, or something else. In the Muhammad belief, they say that the jinn were made from smokeless fire, and they created and they ruled the earth, and then God created humankind, and God said, I made some superior beings, you should bow to them, and they didn't want to, so now they're against us, but they believe that there's good and bad jinn, and the Jewish people believe in the D book, which is similar in nature to that. So it was really quite confusing, but just sticking, not going too far off the track, just coming back to what you're trained for and you've experienced and know. As I said earlier, there seems to be a whole plethora of different types of spirits. That some people say that's a shallow person, that's a nasty human being, incubus, succubus, or something else, demonic or whatever. So can you classify them in a category, or are there subcategories? Like, is there like in the demonic, for example, like?
We're completely two different essences. Some say it's the spirits of pre-Adam race, based on the gap theory between Genesis 1 verse 1 and Genesis 1 verse 3, about the recreation, the original creation of humanity, and fell, and established spirits and demons. But again, there's nothing biblically at all to warrant that. To warrant that explanation. Other people say it's the offspring of angels and women, talking about incubus. And again, really, people, that really is unfortunate that people are trying to say that, because they don't quite understand what an incubus and succubus are and what they actually do. And so therefore the thought that they're offspring of human beings and demonic entities just, it's based on the sons of God in Genesis 6 verse 2, where angels basically, it was believed to have relations with daughters of men, and they produced an offspring.
Right, I remember reading that. But what are the differences between the incubus and the succubus? I wasn't sure about that.
Well, a demonic entity,
as a researcher and teacher, it's really a subject that's not breached often enough, and it's really misunderstood. So I wanted to start off by asking you, the Bible mentions angels and the devil, and the Quran also mentions angels and the jinn, with a slight difference about the jinn. But I was wondering if you could just explain a little bit about what a demon is and why they hate humans so much.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of debate from theologians as far as the origins of demons. And, some people would say they are spirits of deceased evil people. And that's actually a view of Philo, Josephus, and some early Christian writers. Even ancient Greeks argue that as well. Really, that's proved false by Scripture, because, in Luke 16, verse 23, talks about what happens to the evil people who choose to reject God's grace and do evil. So that's really, honestly, the very essences of a human being and an angel are two different things. So therefore, I don't believe the spirits of deceased evil people.
454-7006. It's also posted on our radio show page. Now we'd like to welcome our wonderful guest, Bishop James Long. Welcome, Bishop, and how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for inviting us. I do appreciate it.
We appreciate having you here, too. As we said privately before the show started, that there seems to be an amazing amount of evidence about almost everything paranormal out there, and a great deal of the negative experiences that people have, or perhaps paranormal groups have lately, especially with all these shows on the TV. People think they can pick up after watching the show, get a kid, and go out and do something. And then when they encounter something, whatever it is that's really negative, they either can't help the people, they don't understand it, and they can't tell the difference between if it's a mean human spirit or a diabolical infestation or whatever the case may be. It's really, I would say, in my opinion,
the incubus level will attack women on a sexual nature, and a succubus attacks men on a sexual nature. But with offspring of angels and women, or demonic entities and women, they'll say it's Nephilim. It's because of they say Genesis chapter 6 verse 4. You see, they say they were demons. So people will try to say that Nephilims were actually these offsprings, and quite honestly, that's not true at all. And as a matter of fact, there's no indication at all that Nephilims were demons at all. And if you look at the actual translation, the proper translation of Scripture, they were probably seen as heroes or fierce warriors. So the translation is incorrect. What I believe, and makes more sense theologically, is they were fallen, unconfined angels who have rejected God's grace, who refuse to acknowledge that humankind is created in the image of God. And so that is what I think theologically is more sound than all of them.
That's very interesting, and I don't mean to get off the track, but since she brought that up, there's a whole cacophony, so to speak, of dark